It was 6:47 a.m. on a Sunday when Adelaide Farrow's phone lit up on the nightstand. She had been half awake already, that particular state of early morning consciousness where the house still feels like yours, quiet and unhurried. Emma and Paige were down the hall, both still sleeping. Curtis had left for what he described as a working weekend in Milwaukee on Friday morning, kissed her cheek with the absent-mindedness of a man operating on routine rather than intention, and said he'd be back by Monday evening. He had not called once. The notification was from Christine, her sister-in-law. "You need to look at this. I'm sending you a link." Adelaide turned the phone face down on the sheet, then turned it back. She followed the link. The account was @Zara.BeebCreative. She didn't recognize the name. The profile belonged to a woman she'd never heard of. 20s, dark hair, the kind of Instagram presence that classified itself as lifestyle content through photographs of restaurant tables and hotel windows and mornings that always looked more curated than real. The most recent post was a video. A room tour, it seemed, a reel panning slowly across a high-end hotel suite. Milwaukee by the look of the skyline outside. Adelaide almost closed the app. Then the camera moved across the nightstand by the bed, and a phone lying there face up lit briefly as a notification came in, and the lock home screen was visible for less than 2 seconds. She recognized it before she could stop herself. It was the photo she'd taken 4 summers ago at their lake house in Lake Geneva. Emma, 8 years old, squinting hard into the afternoon sun with her gap-toothed smile. Paige leaning sideways into her older sister's shoulder with the expression of a 6-year-old who has decided she is too dignified for photographs. Adelaide had laughed when she said it as Curtis's lock screen. Said something about how he ought to look at his daughter's faces more often. She had never considered, in any version of her life, she might have imagined, that those two faces would appear in the background of someone else's reel. Adelaide set her phone down very carefully, as if it were something fragile. The room was still. The house was still. Somewhere down the hall, her daughters slept. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the neighborhood street. A sprinkler was running on someone's front lawn. A neighbor's dog was midway through its morning route. The entire world was proceeding normally, which felt, at that moment, almost offensive. She did not cry, not yet. She walked to Emma's door and opened it just enough to see the shape of her daughter under the blanket, the small, even rhythm of her breathing. She crossed the hall to Paige's room. Same thing, both girls, asleep and unaware, in the ordinary safety of a Sunday morning. She pulled both doors closed softly and went to the kitchen to make coffee. She was not a woman who fell apart before 7 a.m. She was not a woman who fell apart in the morning at all, if she could help it. She sat at the kitchen island in her robe, wrapped both hands around the mug, and began to think. Adelaide Farrow had built Farrow Financial Advisory from a single client and a sublet office in Wicker Park, working around nap schedules and school pickup times for 3 years, while Curtis built Farrow Development Group on the foundation of contacts she had helped him develop. Her name was on her firm's door. Not Curtis's name, hers. She had been careful about that. She was the kind of person who, when something required doing, grew very quiet and very precise. Her mother had sometimes called this coldness. Her clients called it steadiness under pressure. Adelaide understood it as the only way she knew how to get anything done correctly. By 9 a.m., she had researched the account thoroughly. Zara Bennett, 27 years old, marketing coordinator at a boutique agency in River North. Her LinkedIn listed Farrow Development Group as a current client account. Her Instagram stretched back 18 months, and Adelaide moved through it the way she moved through financial statements before a portfolio review, methodically, looking for the story underneath the surface figures. She found it in the accumulation of small details. A restaurant they'd been to for their 12th anniversary. A jacket she recognized draped over a hotel chair. A watch, a pair of hands at the edge of a frame. Curtis never appeared directly. He appeared in the architecture of the images, the way a person appears in a life, even when they believe they're invisible. Zara's reel had been up for 6 hours. Adelaide did not report it. She did not message the account. She did not call Curtis. She poured a second cup of coffee and opened her calendar. The Chicago Commercial Development Awards were 10 days away. Curtis was being recognized at the gala for the Lakeview mixed-use project, a development that had taken 4 years to complete and had been shaped, in its earliest financing stages, by introductions Adelaide had made before they had 2 daughters and a house in Lincoln Park. His name would be called before 400 people. His profile would be printed in the program. Faro Financial Advisory had sponsored a table at the awards for 6 straight years. As part of that sponsorship, Adelaide had always purchased a personal congratulations announcement in the printed program, a small tradition that had started as sentimentality and continued as habit. A photograph, a few lines, her name. She picked up her phone and texted Tobias, her assistant. "I need you to find me the contact for the gala program coordinator. Today, if possible." He replied within 2 minutes. "It's Sunday, Adelaide." "I'm aware," she typed back. He called her 45 minutes later with a name and a number. By 2 p.m., she had submitted her materials. She wrote the copy herself, in under 4 minutes, because she already knew exactly what she wanted to say. The ad was clean. Black background. A single photograph, their wedding portrait, taken 14 years ago outside St. James Cathedral. Both of them looking towards something just off camera, with the unguarded ease of people who believed they were still building the same thing. Below the photograph, in clean white text, 14 years, 2 daughters, 1 firm bearing your name and 1 bearing mine. Congratulations on your award. Curtis, I'll be in the room, Adelaide. No accusations, no other names, no hashtags, no explanation. She confirmed the placement, page 7, right-facing, directly opposite his award profile, and closed her laptop. Then she drove to her mother's house to collect Emma and Paige, who had been there since Saturday morning for a planned overnight. On the way home, she stopped for ice cream, and she let Emma talk the entire drive about her soccer tournament and let Paige explain, at considerable length, an ongoing conflict with a girl in her class over disputed ownership of a game at recess. Adelaide listened. She asked follow-up questions. She was entirely, deliberately present. That evening, after both girls were in bed, she sat in the kitchen alone for a long time. She allowed herself 1 tear. Just 1, and only because no one was watching. Because in 10 days the room would know. The night of the Chicago Commercial Development Awards was the kind of October evening the city does well. Cold coming off the lake, the skyline hard-edged against a dark sky, the kind of night that makes everything feel consequential. Adelaide wore midnight green, a sleeveless structured gown she'd bought for a conference 2 years earlier and never found occasion to wear. She arrived alone, declined the coat check's offer, and took a glass of sparkling water from the first passing tray. She was not drinking tonight. She wanted to remember everything precisely. Curtis did not know she was coming. She had told him, very casually the week before, that she'd decided to skip the dinner, a scheduling conflict with a client. He had said that's fine in the tone of a man who had already stopped paying attention. She had changed her RSVP 48 hours later, after she'd confirmed the program placement. The ballroom held 400 people and the particular energy of a room where everyone knows everyone, and all of them are carefully watching. Adelaide knew most of them. 3 people stopped her on the way to her table to say it was good to see her. The programs were already on every seat. Cream cardstock, the association's seal embossed on the cover. Adelaide sat. She did not open hers. She watched the room instead. Curtis arrived at 7:04 p.m. through the far entrance, in his gray suit, his hand briefly at the elbow of a young woman in a champagne chocolate dress. A gesture that lasted only a second, but long enough. Zara Bennett, in person, looked younger than her photographs. She carried her clutch the way people carry things when they aren't entirely sure they're supposed to be somewhere. Curtis guided her toward a table near the stage. He was already in networking mode. The warm, practiced animation he deployed at industry events, the version of himself Adelaide had once found impressive. Dinner service started. Adelaide ate, spoke with her table mates, and waited. It began at 7:22 p.m. A developer at the adjacent table picked up the program, flipped through it, and went still. She watched his face change. A small, private alteration. The moment when a person understands something they didn't understand a second earlier. He leaned toward the woman beside him. She read it, looked up. Her gaze moved across the room with the speed of someone who now knew what she was looking for. Across the ballroom, Curtis reached for his program. She watched him open it. He flipped through with the easy confidence of a man expecting to find his own name in a flattering context. He found page 7. The change was not dramatic. Curtis was too controlled for drama in public. But she saw the small locking of his shoulders, the arrested stillness that moved through his body like current, the pause that lasted one beat too long. He looked up. His eyes found hers across the room, with the accuracy of someone who had already understood everything. Adelaide held his gaze. She lifted her water glass and took a slow, unhurried sip, set it down, returned her attention to the man beside her, who was telling her about a riverfront project he wanted to bring to her firm. She listened carefully. She did not watch Curtis cross the room. He found her in the corridor outside the ballroom, by the windows overlooking the river between the main course and dessert. Adelaide. His voice was held tight, the way he held things when he was furious in a context where fury was not available to him. She turned. His jaw was set. Behind him, through the glass panels of the ballroom doors, Zara was still at the table, scrolling her phone. "You look well," Adelaide said. That ad. Close to her, quiet, the way someone speaks something they don't want overheard. "What were you thinking?" "I think I was thinking about 14 years, she said. "You humiliated me in front of the entire industry." She looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that had deepened across the years she'd known him, at the gray at his temples she had once told him looked distinguished and had genuinely meant it. "I put our wedding photo in a program," she said, "with my name. If that humiliated you, I'd like you to sit with why." He said nothing. "Emma and Paige were on your lock screen," she said quietly, without a waver. "In that room, in that hotel. I want you to think about that tonight." She adjusted her stole. "When you're ready to speak formally," she said, "have your attorney contact mine." She walked back into the ballroom. She stayed through the award ceremony and watched Curtis accept his plaque and deliver the acceptance speech he had clearly prepared before this evening had become what it was. When he said none of this would have been possible without the people who believed in me from the very beginning, the particular quality of silence that moved through several nearby tables was small and knowing and not quite sympathetic. Adelaide did not smile, she simply watched. At 9:40 p.m. she collected her coat and left. Across the ballroom, Zara Bennett had understood that something was wrong before the main course arrived. She had seen the programs on every table. She hadn't opened hers immediately. She was focused on appearing comfortable in a room where she clearly wasn't. When she finally flipped through it during a quiet moment, she found page 7. She read it twice. She knew that photograph. Curtis kept a framed copy in his home office. When she'd once asked about it, he'd told her it was an old professional photo from an early project partnership. Someone who had relocated years ago. He'd explained that the marriage was already finished in every way that mattered, that they maintained appearances for their daughters, that Adelaide had agreed to the arrangement, that he and Adelaide had a mutual understanding. She had believed him, or she had decided to believe him, which she was only now beginning to understand was a different thing entirely. She looked up, found Curtis near the corridor doors, in a quiet exchange with a woman in midnight green who had the absolute composure of someone who had known exactly what this evening would be before it began. Adelaide Farrow. Zara had never connected the name to a face before now. She called Curtis 4 times that evening. He answered none of them. She took a car home alone and sat in her apartment and looked at the reel she had posted from the Milwaukee hotel. She deleted it at 11:09 p.m. By then it had already been screen recorded by at least 2 people in separate industry group chats she'd had no idea existed. Her phone rang at 7:15 a.m. Monday. Her agency's creative director. A conversation about the Farrow development account, which had been their largest active relationship, which she had personally managed for 14 months, and which had been terminated effective immediately by direct client request. The contract allowed for it. It had always allowed for it. She sat for a long time with the understanding that she had been, for 14 months, the only person in the arrangement with anything genuinely at risk. Curtis had a firm. He had a name. He had a gala program in 400 people's hands with his wife's name at the bottom, which those 400 people would remember as a demonstration of her class long after they'd forgotten his failure. He had been protected from every direction, and she had not noticed because she had been too busy believing she was something more than an arrangement. She had not been. Adelaide filed for divorce on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the gala. The first call she made afterward was to the guidance counselor at Emma and Paige's school to discuss how to approach the coming months with children who were 9 and 6, and would have questions she intended to answer honestly, in the particular honest way that protects children without deceiving them. She told Emma and Paige that Saturday afternoon in the living room, with the television off and a plate of their preferred snacks on the coffee table, because she had found over the years that difficult conversations go better when something ordinary is also present in the room. She told them she and their father were going to live separately, that this was an adult decision and had nothing to do with anything either of them had done, that both of their parents loved them completely and were not going to stop. She used the simplest words available without being dishonest, because she believed children deserve the truth shaped for them, not silence shaped to protect adults. Emma asked if she would have to change schools. Paige asked if they could now get the dog they had been discussing for 2 years. Adelaide said no to the first. She gave the second genuinely serious consideration. 6 weeks later, a brown rescue mutt named Biscuit arrived, destroyed one throw pillow within his first hour in the house, and then settled into the household with considerable dignity. The restructuring of Faro Financial Advisory took 4 months. Adelaide untangled the accounts that had overlapped with Curtis's firm, a process that required patience and precision and the particular satisfaction of work that has been overdue for longer than you knew. 3 of their largest mutual clients followed her without being asked, people who had, it turned out, always understood her as the reason those relationships functioned at all. She brought in Gretchen Solano, a quiet and exceptionally sharp woman who had spent over a decade at a downtown institutional firm and was looking for something smaller and more deliberate. Together, they rebuilt the practice from the inside. The office moved to River North. The new conference room had a view of the Chicago River and walls painted in a color Adelaide had chosen herself without consulting anyone. She had a small plaque made for the door, just the firm's name, and below it, her own. She was not building a movement. She was not cultivating a public narrative or courting the attention that briefly orbited her name in the weeks after the gala, when the story moved through Chicago's professional networks in the quiet, efficient way that mostly true stories do, when no one will confirm them on record. She had never wanted any of that. She wanted to do good work, be respected for it, and raise 2 daughters who knew what it looked like when a woman built something that was entirely and structurally hers. The program ad had been her one calculated moment of public truth, placed where it could not be avoided, signed with her own name. She had already moved past it. On the last day of January, Adelaide Faro sat in the new conference room with her coffee and the river below her and a sealed envelope on the table. From her attorney, the final decree. She held it for a moment before she opened it. She thought about the Sunday morning in October, when Christine's message had lit up her phone, and she had felt the floor shift beneath her without making a sound. She thought about Emma and Paige sleeping down the hall, and ice cream on the drive home, and the Saturday afternoon conversation on the couch with snacks on the coffee table, and Biscuit demolishing a throw pillow with the cheerful conviction of a dog who has decided he lives here now. She thought about page 7, about the corridor by the river windows, and the quality of Curtis's silence when she'd said, "I want you to think about that tonight," and how calm her own voice had sounded to her, calmer than she'd expected, as if some part of her had been prepared for a long time. She thought about what she had not done. She had not put Zara's name anywhere. She had not released a statement. She had not returned calls from the 2 journalists who'd reached out in the days following the gala. She had placed the truth in a room full of people who would remember it, written her own name beneath it, and gone home. She opened the envelope. Read through it carefully, the way she read every document that mattered. Then she set it on the table and looked out at the river. It was moving the way the Chicago River moves in January, gray and unhurried, carrying whatever falls into it without stopping to explain why. She had always found rivers instructive in a quiet way. They didn't reverse, they didn't wait for conditions to improve. They simply found the path available and kept moving. No one tells you, when you've been betrayed by someone you chose, that the hardest part will not be the anger and will not be the grief, though both of those are real and they take the time they take. The hardest part is learning to put down the question of why they did it. That question had always belonged to Curtis. It was never hers to carry, and she had spent too many months carrying it before she understood that. What had always been hers was the morning after. She had gotten up on that October Sunday, made coffee, and thought clearly. She had gone for ice cream and listened to her daughters talk about soccer and playground politics, and all the urgent, ordinary concerns of childhood. She had written 7 lines on a black background, signed her own name, and then kept going. Down the hall she could hear Gretchen on a call, the measured, unhurried cadence of a woman in the middle of closing something. Adelaide pulled her laptop toward her. She had a 10 o'clock with a new client, a woman who had spent 2 years building a company from scratch and needed someone who understood what it actually cost to build a thing that lasted. She opened the file. She began to read.